Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home. Okay, welcome everybody to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. If you've happened upon us for the first time, welcome. This is where we talk about all things that are pertinent to the emotional eater's experience, because this is your home if you struggle with food and weight and you're sick of all the diets and nonsense around that. So we get down to the nitty gritty and talk about real stuff here. Now, my guest today is such a sweetheart, and you are going to love him. Dr. Alan Hopkins is a graduate of Loma Linda University School of Medicine, where he was elected into the prestigious Alpha Omega Alpha Medical Honor Society for leadership and academic excellence. He is he's board certified in emergency medicine and completed an A4M fellowship in anti-aging medicine. And Dr. Hopkins is the current CEO of YourLabWork.com and an affiliate physician with the Dell Medical School Department of Surgery and Perioperative Care. And there's so much more I could say, but it's all going to sound like Charlie Brown's mom after this. So welcome, Alan. So glad to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I adore you and your awesome wife, and you guys bring so much to the world of health and all that you're about. So really feel happy that you've joined us. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we were just talking before the show about Loma Linda, because that's out here in California. And it's in Riverside County. And I recently read about Loma Linda, the town being a blue zone. And will you talk to us about that? Because I know what that is, but I don't know a whole lot more than very basic knowledge.
Yeah, well, there was a book that came out, several years ago by Dan Buettner, and it talked about the 5 blue zones. And, he was really, he was a writer that was also a researcher, and he was very interested in finding the areas of the world where they had the most people that would live past 100 years of age. And so it was really a whole idea around anti-aging, who's doing what right and where do they live? And in the United States, the only blue zone is actually in Loma Linda. And we had more people there that were, of course, my field was medicine, but I had more, surgeons that I worked with that were over 80 years of age, still working and very competent and very good, very skilled with their hands. And, what I learned from that is, the importance of whole foods. Now, I don't believe in diets, so maybe that's exciting for everybody, but I don't actually believe in diets. I just believe in eating as naturally as possible. And that really is whole foods. And that's really what this blue zone is about in California. It's about, eating lots of whole foods, fruits, nuts, and vegetables, don't smoke. Most people there don't drink. They have very strong social relationships and a sense of community. So it's that sense of belongingness as we get older, I think, that really fuels things. So I have a lot of family and stuff that have lived quite old, and what fuels them is that sense of being a part of something still, and not being, a strain on the family. And so I really saw that at Loma Linda. People were quite active, very, very late in their life, and that was awesome to see. I mean, it's just really awesome to see. But yeah, definitely Loma Linda is a blue zone for all of those reasons.
That's incredible. It's a very religious area, isn't it? It's like, does that foster that community?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The community part of it for them is and also the kind of the no smoking and very little drinking. We didn't have a lot of deaths, due to, cirrhosis from alcohol and those kind of things, because we just didn't have a lot of issues with alcoholism like there may be in other communities. So, the drugs, the alcohol, the smoking, they weren't really a big part of that community. And a lot of that was for religious, reasons. Mm-hmm. But I think, the people that I deal with now, it's very few and far between that you can smoke for 50 years and live to, 80, 90 years of age. That doesn't typically happen. It typically shortens your life by at least 10 years or more, smoking alone, if we're just talking about that.
Yeah, boy, they've really proved it, haven't they, in that community, that it really pays off to not drink and smoke.
Yeah, and exercise too. I mean, they're very big into into getting out into nature and, walking every day. And most people there eat well up into their 80s, 90s, even over 100 will go out, walking every single day. It's just using their bodies as a part of their life. And, and it leads to good emotional health too, right? I mean, when you're outside and you're using your body and you don't experience as many aches and pains and, just like anything, if you use it, you're not going to lose it. That's sort of the principle.
Yeah, it's so amazing. It's really fascinating. I mean, it's unfortunate there's only one place in the US, that can be called a blue zone, but thank God there is such a place.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate to train there and to experience it. And I will say this, as far as medical training goes, what I loved about it is they taught us to approach a person as if they were a whole person, not just a disease. So it's not, Jack, the 47-year-old guy with cancer, that we're treating with X, Y, and Z. It's Jack, he's married, he works, down at the post office. He's got 3 kids. His biggest concerns are, how he's going to get through this very stressful time and illness. And by the way, he also happens to have cancer. So the whole idea was to really get to know the person and what motivates them and what their support system is, because that you're just blasting them with a medical treatment that could oftentimes make them extremely ill and actually want to die. And so the whole idea was to build that person up and give them the strength to endure what you knew was coming for them. And you could only do that through support of their family and friends. And, so that was the cool thing about training there, is I think that was very inbred in thinking about a person as a person and not a disease. And that's a different approach in conventional medicine, I think.
It's so different. I mean, I would think that's very rare, actually, to have conventional training that's that holistically focused.
Yeah, it was a really neat thing to experience. It really was. And the people that were there, the teachers and, everyone was very committed to that because they saw the results of it and they were touched personally by it. And I think, the issue with medicine is I feel like some places teach you to not get emotionally involved, because there's so much pain there. And so it's almost like you're going in and you're fixing a car and then you're like putting the car out back on the road. Well, that's not a real satisfying thing, right? I mean, you can be good at fixing it, but it's just not as satisfying as getting to know somebody and being able to be with them during their journey, even if their journey ultimately leads in them passing. The experience of being there and supporting them and actually caring for them in a different way is the way it was taught there. And I appreciated that.
Oh my goodness, that is fantastic. Talk to me, Alan, about your experience, because you've worked a lot with obesity patients. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so, I'm an emergency medicine doctor, and I've been doing emergency medicine for about 20 years. When I turned 40, which was 7 years ago, when I turned 40, I had this kind of epiphany, and I was like, this is so weird. I've been practicing for all this time, and I'm diagnosing more cancer. I'm seeing more diabetes, and I'm seeing more people struggle with their weight than I'd ever seen before. I mean, it literally has gotten worse over a couple decades. Instead of, I know our technology is so much better. Our ability to diagnose and treat is amazing. And yet everything with chronic disease is getting worse. So we've gotten really good at the acute stuff, but the chronic disease is just exploding. And so at the age of 40, I had this epiphany that I really wanted to learn more. And as an emergency medicine doctor, we're taught, we're taught to just patch people up and take care of them and, do what we need to do in that time. And it really is not ingrained in us. How do we prevent, things from happening? Right. How can I prevent you from ever showing up in the emergency department with your chronic disease? Is there a way to take a person who's developed an early stage disease and reverse it? And that's what I became interested in. And then I began to study into that arena. And so that's sort of brought on where I am now. As far as the obesity and diabetes epidemic, it is horrible. The CDC is predicting by the year 2050 that about 35% of all Americans will have diabetes.
Wow.
That's unbelievable. And just in the last few years, we've seen the numbers increase from 26 million to 29 million people with diagnosed diabetes. And we've also seen the number of pre-diabetics, meaning they're very likely to go on to diabetes. Those people went from 79 million to 86 million. just over a period of 3 years. So we're talking about a tsunami of diabetes that's coming. And of course, along with the diabetes often is obesity, because obesity is sort of an end result of the burden of all the sugar that we're taking in. I mean, we're massively addicted to sugar in this country, and massively just addicted to eating low cost, low nutrient dense foods. And, part of it is we don't want to spend the money on the healthy food. Part of it's that the healthy food spoils right away. So we've got to go to the store every 3 days. And the other part is it's just inconvenient, right, to eat healthy. But we're seeing the consequences on that. And certainly we're seeing it on a global scale too. It's not just the United States. We're now seeing more diabetes than we've ever seen in the history of the world. And so really it is a big problem. And I deal a lot with that in trying to identify people who are at risk and then reversing it.
Yeah, good for you. That's amazing. So a lot of people, I seem to run into people who are pre-diabetic, but they're not necessarily overeaters or overweight. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, for sure. So, the important thing about diabetes is we ask ourselves, genetically, are we at risk? So what does that mean? That means, did mom have diabetes? Did dad have diabetes? Did the grandparents have diabetes? Does diabetes really run in our family? If one of the parents has diabetes, you're very high risk to become a diabetic yourself, no matter what your weight is. If both parents had diabetes, you're extremely high risk. So we're given these genes that can turn on. And when they turn on in both of our parents, we're just at high risk of turning them on. And right now, the average 8-year-old consumes more sugar in that first 8 years of life than the great-grandparents did during the entirety of their lives.
Wow.
So what kind of pressure does that put on our little bodies, right, when we're 8 years old and we've already consumed that much sugar? So it really is a phenomenon that we're seeing now in younger and younger people. Prior to 1980, there were 0 cases of people with type 2 diabetes under the age of 20. Now we're seeing 50,000. So there's an enormity of the problem. And I really think it just boils down to, we as conventional medicine doctors have failed. The American Diabetes Association has failed. The people that I work with who are the leading researchers in the world on diabetes, they will go to the American Diabetes and tell them that they failed and that they're failing. So it's a massive problem. And, we all need to be aware that, that all of us are at risk. I mean, I'm at risk. I have it in my family. So I know if my grandma has it, my dad has it, I know that I'm at high risk. So I have to do some things right now to monitor for that. So that's what I do personally. And I think everybody should be aware of that. So that's why I kind of push hard for people to know their numbers. It's very important for people to get screened. Everybody should have a fasting glucose, a hemoglobin A1C, which is a 3-month measurement of your glucoses over 3 months, very stable. And it kind of starts with that. And if a person knows that, that's good. Now, there is an advanced test that not a lot of doctors test for. They don't know a whole lot about it. And that's fasting insulin. And it's the first thing we see on the road to diabetes. And when you're overweight, you have a tendency to have a really high fasting insulin. What is insulin? It's a hormone that your pancreas makes to bring down blood sugar, okay? The problem is it's a fat fertilizer. And so most people that struggle with weight loss actually have really high levels of insulin that are telling their bodies to hang on to fat. Even if they cut their calories down dramatically, they still have difficulty losing weight. So if you're having a difficult time losing weight, one of the first things that I look at is a fasting insulin, a fasting glucose, and an A1C, because I want to make sure you're not in that spectrum of diabetes, because it starts with insulin resistance. That's the first thing we see. And then you see the prediabetes come, and then you see the diabetes. And so checking that fasting insulin, if a person's struggling with their weight, is a really smart idea, because if it gets lowered, it helps them to actually lose weight. And that actually, can be quite discouraging when you're doing everything possible and your weight's still, not moving anywhere. And what if it's a hormone problem? Well, that's what insulin is. It's a hormone, and it's a huge problem that's going undiagnosed right now because nobody's checking it.
Wow. So if somebody checks it and it's high, how do they bring it down?
Yeah. So, there's a couple of things. Number one, there's an awareness of, okay, do I have a problem with eating too much sugar? So I can tell you that about 80 to 85% of my patients have this problem, and that is they just don't know how much to take. And so if I tell them, you can eat all the whole foods you want, so all the fruit you want, because people know there's sugar in fruit. So you can eat all the whole food you want, as many, oranges and apples and whatever. You can have that, but everything that has a label, you need to limit it to 25 grams or less of where it says sugar. If we just start there with about 85% of my patients, that's enough to lower it and they start losing weight. It's
interesting.
They don't know. And the average American is taking in 150 to 200 grams of sugar per day. So we have this huge intake. Nobody knows that it should be 25. Not because Dr. Hopkins said it should be 25. It should be 25 because the World Health Organization told this a couple decades ago when they noticed that we were eating all this low fat stuff, right? I mean, everybody was eating low fat because we thought that was the carb. We were wrong. Like that whole thing was wrong. That whole trajectory put us on a course to diabetes like we've never seen before. Because if it doesn't have fat in it, what does it have? Sugar, right? Carbs. And so what happens is we became a carb-loving country. And carbohydrates and sugar light up our brain like cocaine does. So there's sugar addiction. I mean, this is a big problem that I think we brought on ourselves. When I say we, I mean the doctors. It's like the opioid crisis. I'm an ER doctor. I'm a strong believer that we brought on the opioid crisis ourselves. We began writing narcotics for everybody. They got ear pain, sore throat, whatever. They're getting these narcotics. And so now everybody, there's so many people that have problems with narcotics. So sugar is kind of in that realm. I think we brought it on ourselves.
Yeah, no question about it. And the good side of that is that we can bring it down ourselves.
That's right. Absolutely. With just an awareness. So the 25 grams thing is not widely known. It's not widely known that people on average consume 150 to 200. So there's very simple things you can do in your own house now. And that is you can, like, for example, my children, when I learned about this 25 gram and I read, if you go to the World Health Organization's website and you read about how many grams of sugar they recommend per day, you're like, oh my gosh, this is right. And they have the research behind it. So I went to my children and I every morning they had just cereal, right, with milk. That's just what they had. And I was like, okay, who doesn't have cereal and milk, right, when they're a kid? So I looked at the cereal and they were taking 11 grams of sugar in the cereal they had. And then I looked at the milk, it was non-fat, milk, and it was 14 grams of sugar. So that's 25 grams of sugar. So they were right at the limit when they left the house.
Wow.
And I have 3 boys, and I'm telling you, they're probably all looking for sugar at school, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that before we had an intervention there, they were taking in enormous amounts. So what did we do? Well, I'll just tell you what we did in our family. Very practical. I went to the store and I said, okay, kids, I know you like cereal. You can have whatever cereal you want pretty much, but it needs to be 6 grams or less of sugar. And then I did the milk. We tried soy milk. No, we tried almond milk, 0 grams of sugar. The kids initially kind of felt like it tasted like liquid concrete, is what they told me. But after 2 weeks, they're totally fine. And now they all prefer almond milk, has 0 grams of sugar. So every morning now, instead of 25 grams, my kids are getting 6 grams. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So, or less. So does that help them over a couple of days? Probably not. Does it help them over a couple of weeks? Maybe not. Does it help them over a period of years? Absolutely. It spares that pancreas and it spares that insulin of having to be secreted. So that's one of the first things that a person can do is just be aware of the 25 gram rule. The second thing that a person can do is actually exercise. And it's best to actually exercise first thing in the morning before you eat. We call it priming the pump. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to really mobilize, and this is actually really good for burning belly fat. You actually begin to mobilize belly fat. And so if you exercise, even for 5 to 10 to 15 minutes in the morning, you just wake up, just go on a walk and then take a shower, okay? And then eat, you're going to do a lot better than if you eat and then you work out. Because as soon as you eat, you're going to eat carbs most likely, and your insulin's going to shoot way up. And so it's going to basically tell all your, everything to go into fat stores. So particularly if you're eating hardly any calories. So with insulin resistance, the best thing you can do is build muscle. The more muscle cells you have, the lower your insulin will go. So again, you take in less sugar and you build muscle. So you build muscle cells. Those are the 2 things you can do. Another thing that we do, that we don't do as a nation, we don't get enough sleep. And sleep is really, really beneficial for our body. So I always try to tell people to get at least 8 hours sleep. So if the only thing that anybody got out of us talking was eat less than 25 grams of sugar a day, anything has a label, exercise, particularly first thing in the morning, to build more muscle cells, to lower insulin, to lessen the degree of fat fertilization that occurs, and to get 8 hours of sleep a night, we would be doing wonders. Because those three things, I find for most of my patients, are pretty easy to do once they actually realize these are the top three priorities. So if a person has a high fasting insulin level, that's where we start. And we can fix numerous people that way. There's other people that require more aggressive intervention, depending on how severe their problems are with their actual blood sugar. So, but it's a massive problem. I mean, if there's 86 million pre-diabetics, I suspect there's over 100 million people with insulin resistance syndrome. I can't prove that because the study hasn't been done, but I certainly see it in my patients. An enormous amount of people have this problem.
Wow. So scary. And yet, I mean, just the things you've laid out, those are so doable for everybody. And I just, I take a lot from that. But what if they're eating a lot of fruit though, aren't they overdoing it on sugar, even if it's just whole fruit?
Yeah. So the answer to that is yes. I mean, if you're a diabetic, we typically don't want you eating any more than 2 fruits a day. If that's all you did, if I really believe that my patients just went out and ate fruit, I suppose I would talk to them about it, right? But the truth is, everybody's eating processed foods. And so what I'm trying not to do is I don't want ever a person to look at a whole food and wonder if they should eat it. I just want them to eat it, right? Gotcha. And so if I tell you to limit your fruits and then you're not sure how many you had, and maybe I had 1 or 2, or I don't know, and whatever, I like trying to get people to eat vegetables, super hard. Trying to get people to eat fruit, still pretty hard.
Yeah.
So I'm a very simplistic person, probably because I'm just a very simple man. I like everything to be easy and doable and easy to remember. So to me, 25 grams of sugar, eat all the whole foods you want, exercise, get plenty of sleep. To me, that's an easy message to sell to people, because once they start doing it, the weight starts coming off. They start feeling better because they're getting actually sleep, and they're exercising using their body. So they're starting to mobilize the belly fat. So all those things help with insulin resistance, and they're all very simple messages. Yeah. So those are the 3 sort of take-home points that I wish, everybody would remember from this if they forget everything else.
No, you're so right. And I think especially for emotional eaters, we tend to have a very, how should I say it? We just have a very rationalizing mind. So, and a little bit tricky, I would say. And so at times we might say, oh, I can't remember I've eaten too much fruit. Oh, so they stop eating fruit altogether. And I get that. And I know you see that a lot. Like you're trying to just really lower the bar so everybody can take part in just healthier eating. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So let's talk again. I want to get back to the lab conversation, and so you definitely the fasting insulin. Are there other lab tests for weight loss that you recommend?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're going on a weight loss journey and you haven't had your thyroid checked, that needs to be done because so many people, particularly women, are suffering from hypothyroidism. We think that the reason why women get Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune disease where your body decides to attack the thyroid, we think that many women are getting that because it's more of a kind of a hormonal thing that's triggered by some environmental exposures. Because for men don't get it as much. They still get it, but not nearly to the degree that women do. So what happens is they go to their doctor because they're gaining weight and they're depressed. And so what happens is nobody checks a thyroid test. They don't check a TSH and what I think needs to be checked, which is a free T3. T3 is the active thyroid hormone. And we really want to make sure your TSH is normal and your actual active thyroid hormone is really, really good. For so many people that suffer with yo-yo dieting, one of the things we see is we see them struggle to actually make the active thyroid hormone. So the TSH may be normal and the doctor may be totally fooled in thinking the thyroid's okay. But what's happening is they're having trouble converting inactive thyroid hormone, which is called T4, into T3, which is active hormone. So checking your TSH and your free T3, I strongly recommend that for people just to make sure they don't have a thyroid problem, when you yo-yo diet, you can slow your metabolism for up to 3 years. So
wow.
an enormous amount of time. So let's say you did an HCG diet where you take the shots and you lose 60 pounds in a month and you're feeling all great about yourself. And most people I see that do that, by the way, regain it back in 6 months.
Yes.
Plus more. And the reason why it's always plus more is because their metabolism slowed, most likely because of this conversion problem with the thyroid. So what happens is they gain the weight back and their whole metabolism just really slows. And it slows for years. And sometimes it's really hard to recover that without intervention. When I say intervention, even short-term taking thyroid medicine. So how would you know you needed it? Well, you'd have to get the testing done. So they go to their doctor, they say, I'm gaining weight, I'm feeling depressed, whatever. The doctor puts them on antidepressants and never checks these things. That's happened. Now, I hope it's not happening, a lot, but I know that it happens. And it certainly has happened with a lot of my patients. So if you're struggling with the weight, I do like to check fasting insulin and just make sure there's not a sugar issue. And then I like to also look at the thyroid just to make sure the thyroid is functioning perfectly. And if the thyroid needs a boost, we put you on thyroid medication, whether temporary or permanent, depending on if it's completely shot. And that will actually help speed metabolism. And then you can finally get moving. So many people think that if they just stop eating, they're going to lose weight and everything's going to be okay. Well, everybody has a different reason why they're struggling, right? And you deal with a lot of people that have emotional, issues that, and everybody has an emotional issue, depending on what we're talking about. But the attachment to food and the craving can sometimes be with data you can overcome that. So if I give you data and I say, hey, looks like the reasons why you're struggling, I think that gives a person a boost because it gives them that hope. And like you say, emotional eaters, very logical people. They're looking for the data. They want to, have this.
Sure.
And so I think it's good. Those are the two things that I would recommend the most for people.
Okay.
Because those are things that are the biggest bang for a person's buck.
So you're the lab work guy, and what people don't realize probably listening here is that they don't have to go running to their doctor to get these labs done. And Dr. Hopkins here actually has a company that allows anybody to access their lab work or to get their lab work done. And so will you talk to us about that? Because that's really revolutionary.
Yeah. Well, so the idea was really born out of my own patients. So I had patients that I would order tests on. And, something has happened in the last, particularly 5 years. We've seen deductibles go through the roof. We've seen lab benefits be slashed. And we're seeing more people having to pay for their own healthcare expenses. And in particular, my patients came to me and they said, look, you wanted these labs tests done, and they showed me the bills. And I thought, this is just astronomical here. What's going on? Like, there's got to be a better way. And so as I looked into it, I figured out that there is a better way, and we're able to put it on a national scale. So the way that it works is you no longer have to go directly to your doctor if you want a test done. So let's just say that you're listening to this and you're like, you know what? I want to get an insulin done. Maybe I'm going to check a TSH, and maybe I want to check my blood sugar and all that. And you can go directly to yourlabwork.com and you just go to custom orders, and then you just click, the couple tests that you want. And then if they're abnormal, we really want you to show them to your doctor so that he can work with you medically and reverse the problems that you found. So the whole idea was to empower people to immediately go in and get the tests that they want. They're not having to wait on their doctor. They're not having to pay this a copay. Many of my patients that came from other doctors were frustrated because they knew, for example, they wanted to check their free T3. They wanted a full thyroid panel because they really felt like they had a thyroid problem, but their doctor only would do a certain test. Well, this kind of bypasses that and allows the person to go in and get the tests that they want. And then we point them towards resources, so they can help understand the tests. And most importantly, if we find problems, we really encourage people, they need to go directly in and get these problems fixed. And that will help them on their journey to weight loss. Because if they're not fixed, it's going to be very difficult for them to lose weight.
Right. And so they're going to local draw places like Quest or LabCorp.
Yeah. So we've partnered with Quest, and they have 4,000 draw locations across the U.S. So we simply, we give you a little tool on the website. You click where your zip code is, and it'll pop in all the locations that are closest to you. And then you'll decide if one's close enough for you, if that's what you want to do. You put in your order, what you want, you put in your credit card, you get an immediate confirmation, and then within 24 hours, so it's usually the following day, you can go in and get your blood work done. And, for example, a thyroid test is about a 2 or 3 day turnaround. They get the results. They come to you securely via your email. So you open them up and print them out. So that's kind of the way it works right now. It's made it easy for people to get tests that they want. And so we're excited to provide that for people.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's super. That's really incredible. So how does it work with insurance? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned from the very beginning, the problem has actually been with insurance. And this is the reason why the direct access market has increased dramatically over the last several years, is because people are now more responsible for paying these bills. And if you can go directly down to a LabCorp or Quest or whoever and, order your own blood tests in many states, not in all states, but in many states you can do that. And but the problem is when you go in there, there's only you that's gone in there. And so your price is going to be 50 to 80% higher than my price will be. Well, why can I get a better price? Is because I bring in all these people, right? So it's just like I'm able to go and negotiate better pricing for everyone instead of just a one-off. And so you can do this in some states. Now, for example, you're in California. So we partnered with doctors, particularly in California, that will order the test for you because some states require a physician order. So we partner with doctors who are willing to order the test for you, and they order it. And then we just make sure that they see the result. And then if there's an issue with it, that, they're going to have to take action on whatever that issue is and point you in the right direction.
So they're ordering without my seeing them, is what you're saying?
That's correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In many states, most states, you can order it yourself. So you can go and test out my theory. You can go down and order it in various states. Most of them, I want to say probably about maybe 35 to 38 states, you can do it yourself. The other states will have some limitations which have required us to partner with doctors. So we offer it in 46 states that allow it. And on our website, it talks about, which states that you were participating in. But that's it. It's kind of like a nation. We're basically partnering with Quest to deliver these lab results to people that want them without having to go directly to their doctor. And then afterwards, we encourage people, of course, to share them with your doctor, even if they're normal, right? But I suppose if they're normal, you're not necessarily going to rush right in. But if they're abnormal, maybe you should, because maybe that's what's getting in the way of weight loss or whatever it is. We were going to touch on cholesterol a little bit. Yes. Now's the time to do that. But I also have a passion about cholesterol.
Okay.
And the reason why is because as an ER doctor, 50% of the people that I see who have heart attacks have their cholesterol numbers at goal. Okay. So that means that, they may be taking medicine or whatever, and it's got them to where I think it's okay. That's on the routine testing called a fasting lipid panel. This is what's done by your doctor every year. This is covered by insurance, and pretty much anytime you go get a physical, they should do this, and you should be fasting to get the most accurate result. Mm-hmm. Well, this test actually misses this huge phenomenon going on called lipoprotein A. Have you heard of the deadly Lp(a)?
No.
No. Okay. All right. So don't worry. Not many people have, or maybe we should worry. It turns out that 1 in 5 people have this genetically inherited bad cholesterol particle. It's the worst cholesterol particle there is. And when these people came in and they were still dying from these heart attacks, we began to ask the question, why? We don't understand. Why are these people dying? Even we had people who were at their ideal body weight, who exercised all the time, who nobody would think they would necessarily be at risk, except that maybe their father had a heart attack and maybe grandpa did or whatever. But they look like they lived a pretty healthy life. Well, it turns out that they have lipoprotein A, a fair number of them. So it turns out about 20% of people have this thing. And I didn't really know this until I started checking. And insurance doesn't tend to cover this thing. And so that's why doctors don't typically order it, and they don't understand it. So they don't, they don't learn about it. They don't tell people about it. But I'm going to tell you a story that I hope you remember. So I found it in a patient of mine who was the mother of one of my nurses. She had a heart attack at the age of 46. And she, normal body weight, non-smoker, family history was unknown. But she had a heart attack and all her lab tests were normal. I mean, we ran a comprehensive series of lab tests on her, everything normal. But this lipoprotein A was about 6 times above normal. And so she said, you know, I had the heart attack. And I said, yeah, I do. I said, because you have this genetic thing, and let's get your daughter checked, who was a nurse. So we had her checked. And of course she had it too. We sent her in for a calcium score, and she actually scored high on that. And then she had a lesion on her left anterior descending artery called the widowmaker, right where her mother had a stent put in after her heart attack.
Wow.
So then I checked my wife. It turns out my wife has that. Same thing. Her father has it. And so that means my children are at risk. So when my children get around 20-ish or so, we'll check them and we'll see who has it and who doesn't. And then we'll treat it. And, you know, the treatment can be just eliminating all the other risk factors for developing early heart disease. But we're seeing heart disease like we've never seen before now. I mean, in teenagers that are in car accidents, where we're, you know, doing autopsies on them, and we're finding plaque being laid down in their arteries like we've never seen before. And a lot of it has to do with the sugar epidemic. A lot of it has to do with inflammation that we're seeing from environment and also insulin resistance. And then the other part of it is some of these people do have bad cholesterol problems, and it may be missed. So the researchers figured out a good cholesterol test to do. I think it needs to be done on everybody. It's called the Advanced Lipid Panel. We offer it through our website for $175. So it's very, very reasonable. And if you just get it done once, that's probably good enough unless you have problems. Because what we're looking for is that genetic marker called lipoprotein A. And then we want to see if you have the light, fluffy kind of cholesterol that doesn't tend to cause problems, or do you have the small, dense cholesterol that really gets in the lining of the arteries and causes problems. So this is all prevention, right? So, I mean, I'm an ER doctor. I'm used to taking care of heart attacks. I just took care of a heart attack just the other day. So, I mean, heart attacks happen, right? But wouldn't it be cool if we could slow that down or intervene and push out a great functional life? And that's what we want. And that's what my passion is. So I think everybody ought to be checked with Advanced Lipid Panel. Not because I own a lab company, it's because I've seen about 20% of people, and research shows 20% of people here have it. So it's a massive, massive problem. And of course, diabetes, you know, diabetes is much easier to reverse when you're pre-diabetic. And once you go into diabetes, about 50% of your pancreas has already died. And 80% it's lost about 80% of its efficiency. So that going through pre-diabetes is not a benign process. It's not something that you can just say, oh, it's just pre-diabetes. I mean, we're doing that, right? Conventional doctors, many doctors are saying, lose weight and exercise. See you back next year. Yeah, you're a little pre-diabetic. It's not working. It's not working. People don't know. People need more intervention in pre-diabetes because that's when the cells of the pancreas are actually dying. So diabetes is a whole interesting topic. But my passion is screening for diabetes on the road to it with insulin, glucose, and the A1C, and then the cholesterol issue. That's my passion right there. Screening for that genetic marker and doing some advanced testing to see if you're at risk.
Well, this is a really amazing conversation, and I think so helpful to people listening. And I know it is to me, and I just really appreciate it because, you know, this is serious stuff. I mean, this is what we're putting in our bodies, you know, and the habits that we have are really causing our, you know, determining our lifespan and our quality of life. And so it's just really important that people tune into this and start, you know, getting the blood work done, waking up to what they're doing to their bodies. And it's hard to wake up. I mean, right? We've been unconscious for so long. We just want to, you know, have our goodies and our TV shows and just, you know, hope that everything works out for the best, but it's not working, as you said. And we've got to wake up, as painful as that process can be. You know, it's time to take better care of our health and to make better choices and get support. And that's definitely something that we do here at Heal Your Hunger. And Alan, I just love all that you're doing to help people. And this lab work, concept is really amazing. So people watching and listening, Dr. Alan has provided a way for you to get a 20% discount on your lab work. And you can go to the show notes here to get that special code. But you got to do that and take charge of your health and go ahead and get the work that you need done so you can start taking the actions that you need to take. So I really appreciate it. I have one last question for you, Alan, and that's, I ask I try to always remember to ask my guest, what is your deepest hunger?
My deepest hunger. I would say my deepest hunger is actually to have more time to spend with my little ones and my wife. I've gotten so distracted, like I think many people have, with all the opportunities are out there. It's, I think that if you put yourself first and you can set boundaries for your life, that's really healthy. And I can just tell you a little intimacy here is that I was horrible at doing that. In the last couple decades, I was horrible at protecting that family time and protecting myself, my sleeping time, my personal time, my working out time. I was always trying to people please and do all these things without remembering that I'm going to be a better person for everybody if I take care of myself. And it had to get to the point where I was just so overwhelmed, and everybody was, with the situation to finally get me to realize that. So I'd say my deepest hunger is to stay committed to that because I have to remind myself it's my own personal journey. It's my struggle to make time for myself and to set the boundaries for the things that I love and the people that I enjoy.
Well, that's a perfect message for the people tuning in here today, because I think I know I struggle with that as well, and bright, shiny object syndrome and not realizing and staying committed to what is really important. And that is family and connection and love, because love's what will heal us more than anything.
Yeah. And I read a study, and I do believe this from taking care of many, many people at the end of their life, among men, if we just talk about men, the number one regret for men when they died was, the number one response was, I regret that I worked so much, and that was an understanding that this other stuff is so much more important. Yeah. We can't take the work with us when we go, but the love and the connection and the relationships and the giving that we're able to do to others, it's extremely meaningful. And we hold on to that dearly, particularly at the end of our lives when we look back and we reflect on what we've done. So I would encourage everybody to do just that, to reflect on what's important to you. And for everyone, it's a little bit different.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for being here and sharing yourself and your message. And thank you everybody for tuning in. And please share this show with others and make sure to leave a review on iTunes. We so appreciate it. Thanks, Alan, so much.
Okay. All right. Have a great day. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this show and want to get free support, insider health info, exclusive invites to events, and more, visit healyourhunger.com.